All right, now to a topic that's equally as important as it is boring. Congressional redistricting. Don't reach for your phone. I saw you. Instagram can wait, unless you're grabbing your phone to maybe comment on redistricting. In that case, you can go ahead and email us at thestory@kgw.com. Now look, I'm going to explain this as simply as possible. Here's what happened. Democrats and Republicans, they agreed to work on the congressional maps together, meaning the maps that determine who represent you in Congress. But surprisingly, they couldn't decide on a map together. So the Democrats made a bit of a power play, and they pulled out of the deal and strong-armed their map to the finish line. So now the Republicans are suing, calling it gerrymandering, and hoping that state judges will agree to redraw those maps. You follow so far? Here's what House Republican Christine Drazen told me about it.
As it relates to the congressional lawsuit, it's not that these lines are something that Republicans should necessarily be more concerned about than anybody else. People who care about having fair elections should be the ones that are concerned about this. And it's not that there's one line. It's that the sum total of the districts create an outcome that is already predetermined.
Okay. All right. So what does that mean? That's kind of political talk there. What does it mean? Well, what it means is Republicans think that the Democrats are stacking the deck, which they are. Let me put it to you this way. When people in Oregon vote, about 60% of people vote Democrat or with Democrats, and 40% of people vote Republican or with Republicans. So theoretically, in a perfect world, the districts should be split 4-2. 4 districts for Democrats, 2 districts for Republicans. But when experts look at the map passed by the Democrats have an advantage in 5 districts, not 4, and the Republicans only have an advantage in 1. Now, I talked to Professor Jim Moore about all of this. He teaches at Pacific University, knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. He thinks Republicans actually have a good point, just a bad case.
Is there something in this drawing of the map that should raise some eyebrows?
Yeah, there definitely is. But we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. They didn't give a good alternative.
They didn't give a good alternative. Who is the they? The Republicans. The Republicans, they drew a map, a counter map. And the ones that they drew didn't quite do the job either. Let me explain. This map is the one that the Democrats put out, which according to 538, again, favors the Democrats. And this is the map that Republicans countered with. It's more 50-50, which actually favors Republicans because the state isn't 50-50, as I just said. It's more 60-40. Here's how Professor Moore first explained it to us.
The Republican map for the Congress and for the legislature is designed so that the Republicans who have relatively fewer people, when you look at Democrats and Republicans, it's a 3-2 relationship, 3 Democrats for every 2 Republicans. It makes it so that the Republicans end up with half of the congressional districts, and they would probably move towards about half of the seats in the legislature, in the Senate and the House. So they would be overrepresented if the Republican maps were approved.
Okay, yeah, my head's spinning too. And according to him, he doesn't think this lawsuit has much of a chance. So you might be thinking what I'm thinking. If both maps are partisan, how does that help us? How does that help all the rest of Oregon? The Democrat map is unfair. The Republican counter is unfair. And that doesn't seem fair for the rest of the state.
You know, if I take myself out of the political world, out of the legal world, it does seem a little bit frustrating that at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like voters were given any realistically fair options and that it all is coming down to politics and legalese.
Absolutely. And that's the problem with the redistricting system, not just in Oregon, but all across the country. How big a role should politics play? Should it play any role whatsoever? Since it's given to the states, it will. And how do you take that into account? Other states that have districting commissions have the same problem. Depending on how you put your redistricting commission together, there's a couple of states that they've basically fallen apart because they're too partisan. They're having the same face-off they're having here, but in a commission form. So it's a real tough nut to crack.
Nuts that are tough to crack. I wish I had a solution for you. Instead, we're just going to have to keep our eye on this lawsuit and let you know what happens next.